We are activating your unique self-discovery one show at a time. The Orchard of Wisdom Self-Discovery podcast are at your fingertips, just waiting to inspire and invite you in discovering just how awesome you really are and how to navigate through life in joy, enrichment, personal abundance, in mind, body, spirit, heart, and soul. All the people we bring you are here to serve you on your journey of life. Do enjoy our next show. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Their Story Matters right here on selfdiscoverymedia.com. I am your host, Sarah Troy. My wonderful guest today is Una Bruhns, all the way from originally South Africa. We're going to be talking about that word apartheid. You don't hear much about it today, but she definitely lived it. Her and her family were assessed and segregated and uprooted from their home and sent off somewhere else. She witnessed the Sharpeville horror massacre and just basically lived in the restraints of apartheid. We're going to be talking about her story of living in Johannesburg, South Africa, when apartheid was very oppressing and the regime was very, very damning in many, many ways. And she left there in 1969, went to Germany, met her husband, came eventually to Canada, and we're going to be learning all about that. But she has a new book called Apartheid, and it's about the whites and the non-whites, Nia Blanc, and we're going to be talking about how apartheid, we think we're so advanced today, where we think that we are, we don't have that segregation anymore, but we don't maybe politically, but we are kind of in a lot of ways going back to that, where we are segregating people as according to their color or their status or their politics or their religion. And segregation doesn't work on any level, does it, Una? Welcome to the show.
Yes, it does not, Sarah. Indeed, it doesn't. And it continues.
It does continue. It just puts on a different face with a different title.
Yes, indeed.
Now, living through apartheid, a lot of Canadians certainly not, but Americans will understand it in a different way because it wasn't called apartheid back then, in America, but that segregation, they certainly do know about it. But, tell us a little bit about growing up in South Africa, what it was like for you, the do's and the don'ts, and you can and you can't.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in a little town called Vrededorp, and it was a multicultural little city. And we all lived together, quite happily. There was blacks and whites and coloreds and Indians and Muslims and, and until the apartheid law came into place and everybody was segregated and moved out into different areas. And that caused a lot of bigotry, afterwards. Even families were split up. And so that's the trouble started then, and the police was quite violent
Yes.
in getting those laws going. So my family was moved out of Vrededorp when I was 9 years old. And then we were moved into what they called a colored area, Coronationville. And most of our friends that grew up in Vrededorp we were all scattered. So we lost touch until we were almost adults, and found out where everybody was. And the area where we moved to was a little township. And apparently, when King George V came into, when he was reigning,
Mm-hmm.
he set aside land for the colored people. And that's where all our houses were built at the time. And, people of color, what they did was they segregated you according to the color of your skin.
Mm.
And so, in our family anyway, we were all different colors of the skin color. So a lot of our family members some were, were white, they were reclassified as white, some of us colored. And so, there was a split in the family. And then bigotry, just ran rampant all
Yeah.
over, you know. And yeah, and the police just cracked down on everything and quite violently.
Yes, and violence definitely. I lived in South Africa for 11 and a half years. I went there in 69 when you left, and I left in 80. And I was actually engaged to an Afrikaner at one point whose father was still fighting the Boer War. And because I was British, he really had a him or hate on for me, which is so ridiculous. And, as you said, you were in a community with a whole beautiful melting pot of cultures, which is so enriching, where people don't really look at each other as the color of their skin. It's more about their culture, their character, the community. And, was it a thriving community at this time before it was all divvied up?
um, you mean the way I live now
No,
in the area? Oh, before,
before
no,
the
no, we were just, everybody got along
hmm
and everybody went to the same schools together,
hmm
and it was just beautiful.
So like you were no risk to society.
No,
Right. So
there was
this
no
whole
violence.
right. Yeah, so this whole thing of going back to apartheid, on who decided that it said should be. I'm not quite sure who actually. What is the history of apartheid, of who decided that everybody was going to get segregated and color sorted? It's like
Uh,
laundry, isn't it? Going to color sort
yes,
everybody.
yes. It was D.F. Milan that decided that they were afraid actually
hmm
that colored and black people will take over.
hmm
As you know, at that time, the white community was quite small. So there's not a lot. The blacks overruled everybody else,
hmm
and there was the colored community and the Indians and so forth. So what they did not want the blacks to rule.
hmm
So they thought by keeping them down, dampening them
hmm
down, and not educating them, they would keep ruling. You know,
Yeah,
uh,
we've seen how that's worked out.
yes. So I have a little chapter I would like to read if I can.
Yes, guess go ahead.
It's chapter 6 of my book, and this happened in 1950. The amendment of the Immorality Act. Apartheid and the Immorality Act forbade any intercourse or marriage between whites, black, mixed race, or Asian people. Individuals found guilty of such an offense would be liable on conviction to imprisonment for 5 years. Before the Immorality Act became law, many women gave birth in interracial relationships or marriages. Many of these parents abandoned their children for fear of being implicated
hmm
when the apartheid law came in, and their children found refuge at St. Joseph's Home in nearby Sophiatown. One day we heard cries coming from the churchyard behind our backyard fence. Mumsy, that was my mother, and I decided to investigate. We were shocked to discover 2 children, a little boy and a girl, huddled together in a wheelbarrow. The girl seemed to be about 4 years old, and the boy was approximately 2 years old. Mumsy asked the girl, "What is your name?" She replied, "Arlette." "And his name?" Mumsy asked, pointing to the boy. With tears streaming down her face, she tugged at her unkept blonde curly locks and replied, "Tony." "Where's your mother?" Mumsy asked. Whimpering, Arlette said, "I don't know." Little Tony looked on with sad amber eyes and a runny nose. Both of them looked petrified as they clung to each other. Mumsy took pity on Arlette and Tony. We took them home, bathed, and fed them. For the next couple of days, little Tony crouched in a corner, sucking his thumb. Arlette adapted more easily in fear of what would become of them if she reported it to the authorities. My parents decided to keep them. They became an addition to our family,
Lucky
which
kids.
at that time we were already six in the
Wow.
family. Yeah, so that added to the family. And they stayed with us for the next year until my parents figured out their next step. A year later, a friend of Mamsie adopted Arlette. I remember how traumatic it was when she cried and held onto my skirt, refusing to let go. When her adopted parents came to take her to a new home, we cried ourselves to sleep that night. My cousin Millie adopted Tony later the same year. We kept in touch with them over the years. Fortunately, both matured into happy, stable adults. So, I mean, when the apartheid law came in, a lot of parents were afraid of being arrested.
Hmm.
So they just abandoned their children.
So they were just left in a wheelbarrow and
And,
basically left to die.
well, left to die, or maybe hoping someone would find them, you
Yeah.
know, and we never
It's
did find out who
and
the
this was
parents
started in 1950.
in 1950. Yeah.
Trevor Noah, the comedian, is half black, half white, and
Yes.
he wrote a book, Born a Crime, and he was saying how his mother would have to pretend to be the nanny,
Yes.
so that because he was looking too white, and or she'd be arrested, and that was in the 90s. So it is. This went on for over 40 years
Yes.
before, and kind of reminds me, kind of, in America where the white slave owners, would impregnate the women, and then the children were nothing, right? And
That,
it's this, it is, you can actually understand when you look at, America, you look at slavery, when you look at Africa and quintessential slavery of a different kind, enslaving people, um, you can understand why they hate the white man so much. You can understand that. And it's, of course, not everybody's cast the same color, and we've come a long way now, but you can understand that history is passed on in the DNA, and how it's going to take more than just a couple of generations to ever get over or forgive,
yeah,
um, because it is a total discard of humanity, of human beings, just based on their color, which is absolutely deplorable.
it is. It is. And not only that, they prevented the blacks actually uh, from going to a certain standard of education.
Yeah.
And, and then they had to go into service, doing gardening and being nannies. And
Mm.
so really, they didn't get the education they really deserved just because the color of their skin.
Right, right, exactly. God forbid that they should be smart. I mean, we still have that in North America, especially America, where they still think that, Black people do not have the capacity to
Yes.
to learn or to achieve, which, we just need to look at a few names and you can see the achievement there. And that is still that stupid mindset that's there, that's very, very arcade. When I lived in South Africa, obviously I was a white woman, and I remember having help that lived on the premises, and her husband would come and with the baby, and I would, was so happy they could be together, but they would get into trouble for her having her baby and her husband on the same property, and I would get into trouble for having
Yes.
them there. And it's like, how can you tear a family apart? The baby would have to be miles away with the grandmother in the reserve, and only see the child now and again. And I just couldn't understand, what harm was it doing? Why? I didn't understand this. And of course, I was 14 when I went to South Africa, so kind of the apartheid thing was a while before it kind of clued in on me what really was going on. I got into trouble many a time for kind of speaking out or doing things I shouldn't be doing. But and I think when I left in 1980, it was already the kind of the tail end and the shake-up was beginning to happen, but it was still going on very, very strong. And basically, if you were a person of color, and as I said, Asian in there, they couldn't own homes, they couldn't own businesses, and they were just considered, I remember the word kafirs, right? Just
Yes, yes,
kafirs,
yeah,
um, and just treated as actually vermin all along the line and not as human beings at all.
yeah. And the black miners, they were sent off to work in the mine, and
Mm,
they wouldn't come home for months and months and never seen their families.
yeah.
And some of them never returned, because
Mm.
they got killed. So,
Yes, and just, just another cafe, we can get another one, and just no value of life whatsoever. Every country has an enormous stain in their history of when they've done things wrong. Here in Canada, we've got our Indigenous people with the amount of bodies that have been found, and in the schools by the Catholics, and just the completely wrong, snatching them from their family, cutting their hair, forbidding them to speak their language, trying to make them again, white. And I don't understand this fear that especially the white man has, and I'm a white person, of people and their culture. What is the fear? When you embrace those other cultures, you learn so much from them, you can integrate together, then there is no threat of one person trying to take over the other because everybody's working together. And we've seen this through history over and over again. And generally, the white man who is petrified of anybody of color having power.
yeah, which is very unfortunate. If we could just learn to live together, you
Yes.
know, and have the same opportunities, it would be wonderful. Yeah.
Did all of your family get out?
No, I'm the only one. Um,
Really?
yes, well, the reason why I got out is I met and fell in love with my now husband, which he was a German immigrant to Canada during that time because they didn't educate the coloreds and the non-whites and blacks, so they had to import
Mm.
people from Europe, tradesmen to do the job, and that's where I met and fell in love with my husband. And that was a no-no, and that's what got the ball rolling.
Exactly. So then it was time to go back to Germany. So, um, and again, but see this a great deal because they're not seeing the color, they're seeing the person,
Yeah,
right? And also to fall in love with somebody that is considered a crime. That love has got to weather a great deal, so it's a real good test of love.
yeah.
Um, have you been back to see your family? What has happened
Um,
with?
I waited. Well, I couldn't go back because I left South Africa and went to Germany um, because I couldn't get a visa to leave,
Mhm.
South Africa. So I had to make up a story and go to Germany, and then from Germany, I got a visa to come to Canada.
Mhm.
So I
Um,
didn't see my family for 13 years.
wow, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you did go back, how were you received by, just the general population? Because apartheid was still very strong then, right?
Well, apartheid was strong, but it was beginning to loosen,
Yeah.
you know. And I was amazed how people were trying to integrate.
Hmm.
It's nice to see. And I chuckled because when I walked around the malls and I looked at people, they were all eating in restaurants, mixed people. And I thought, oh gosh, here we go. Before they were Kafirs, now they're sitting next to them and having a meal.
Exactly. Exactly. Um, obviously, along with apartheid when it stopped, there is always that transition phase. And there's a great deal of turmoil going on in South Africa. I have a nephew that's there, and I know at the present moment, due to corruption, that they can only have power, a couple of hours a day, and it's because of, backhanded corruption that's going on. So it kind of was handed over to people of color, but they actually hadn't had the longevity of training on how to run a country. And so
Exactly.
it became very much the backhanded deal where the money's not getting where it needs to go. So you still got family there? Do they, let you know what's
Family,
going?
all my family is still there. Yeah.
And
And
nobody else tried to come out?
no, no.
And when apartheid was dropped, did they kind of move and integrate, or were they kind of too fixed where they were at that time?
No, when apartheid loosened up, then everybody was allowed to, if you could afford it,
Yeah,
to move to the different areas, move into the white areas. As you know, the colors lived in one area and the
yeah.
whites in another, the blacks way in another area. So they all tried to integrate, but it was difficult.
Hmm.
Because the whites wouldn't accept, people of color living next door to them. So
Right.
there's always that fight between them. And when the apartheid came in, even between my family, there was a lot of bigotry
Hmm.
when some were classified white and some were classified colored. So I'll just read you uh, a little note here about reclassification.
Hmm.
So this is my aunt Fiona and Uncle Theo. Mumsy's relations now lived in an upscale neighborhood. Mumsy and Aunt Fiona got into a bitter argument when Aunt Fiona said, "This is now her children," because they were a little darker than I am.
Hmm.
"Maybe I should put these kids in bleach water." Aghast, Mumsy scolded. "God will punish you, Fiona, for being prejudiced towards your own children."
Right.
From then on, we visited our cousins after sunset, so their neighbors would not become suspicious.
Wow.
A family friend dropped Pearl and I off at the gate of Aunt Fiona's house at dusk a week before Christmas. As we ran up the poorly lit driveway, we were terrified when a neighbor's dog started barking and the light shone onto the driveway. Just then, thank God, Aunt Fiona opened the front door and quickly ushered us inside. Our cousins were delighted to see us as they came running down the stairs to greet. Aunt Fiona had set a dining table with festive decorations and delicious food. As usual, there were rancid walnuts that we were prepared to empty into the paper bags we had overnight. We spent the weekend quietly playing dominoes with the boys or cutting out paper dolls in the bedroom. We were fascinated with Priscilla's drink and wet doll. A month later, when Patsy and I visited Aunt Fiona, the neighbor's dog scaled the fence, attacked us, and
Wow.
almost tore Patsy's eye out.
Wow.
The neighbor called his dog off, but did not assess the damage that his dog caused. Patsy received 3 stitches to the inner corner of her right eye. I received long scratches to my arms to get the beast off my sister. Priscilla felt sorry for Patsy and gifted her the wet roll. That was the last time we visited our cousins overnight.
Hmm. Yes. Oh my goodness. Yeah. You still got, kind of the white man's prejudice there, but I mean, to be segregated so much within the family, you're all part of the same blood. Was it just the people that they married that some were a little darker than the others, so therefore, or like with the Malaysian, with the Bantu, with the Xhosa, why was there so much different color in the family, and why, if you're all under the same family name or the same family group, I don't understand the segregation. Is purely
Well,
based on color?
it was purely based on color
Wow.
and the texture of your hair.
Wow.
You know. And as you know, we were all integrated before apartheid.
Hmm.
So there was a lot of intermarriage at the time.
Hmm.
And so the kids were all different colors.
And
Yeah.
what is your background?
Well, my mother's family came from the island Saint Helena. Do you know Saint Helena?
Know of it.
Yes. So they came with the people that they worked with in Saint Helena, and they immigrated to the Cape. And my father was actually from Scottish descent. His father was Scotsman. And when all these, this apartheid started, everybody split because we were all different colors. And so I really did not know my grandfather.
Mm.
We never saw him because he remarried, and they lived in a white area. So we did not really know him until the day he died.
So
When
your mother was considered black or Malaysian or
Well, they called him Saint Helena, and they were, dark skinned,
right?
my
Because
color.
you're very fair.
Yeah, and we were, we all had straight hair, and that's why when they came to assess us, the authorities, I don't know if you heard about the pencil test. It was called the pencil test when they started segregating people. It
Mm-mm.
was a test where they would get the children together and they would put a pencil in your hair. And if the pencil fell out, you were colored. But if the pencil stayed in, because the blacks have thicker hair,
Right.
then you were black.
Oh my
Did not
God.
say if you were of the same family or not.
So children would be separated from their family just because their hair is a different texture.
That's right. It
And
was
where would they go? Just abandoned or whoever would take them?
whoever would take them,
Good God. How
you know,
cruel.
or
Mm,
another family member would take them.
mm,
It was actually a white family in Cape Town, uh, where one of the children did the pencil test, and of course the pencil stayed in her hair, didn't fall out, and so they classified her as colored, and she couldn't go to the same school anymore. And they were all tested, was the same. They all had the same DNA,
mm.
but no, she had to leave the
All
family,
because of the hair.
all because the pencil test.
Right. No, I
Yeah,
have never heard of that one. And it's like, who comes up with these? Right? Who
I don't.
comes up with these? These are inhumane
I
because they're
know.
not looking at you as people, heart, soul, spirits, as humans, right? They're just subjects.
Yeah, yeah, and a lot of people. I mean, there were some uh, blacks who were classified as colored, some coloreds as white, some whites as colored, and it just goes on and on.
Good God. I do remember an albino person of color who was too white and rejected by their own people, and of course not accepted by the white people. So they
Yeah,
would just live in no man's land because nobody would accept them, which is so sad. But uh, I just, I've always said that I really don't care what color people are, polka dot for all I care. It's, for me, it's always about the heart and soul of a person, the character of a person. That is what I want to see. And we've got to understand that this vessel that we're in, whatever color it is, it's just carrying our heart and soul and spirit through this, having a human existence. And I feel that, humans have become so fearful even of their own shadows. When you look at what happened in Germany, with Jewish people or anybody that was against them, what humans do to each other and the excuses they make to do it is just so deplorable. And it's like we're so much more capable of loving and caring and being creative that why do we give so much energy to that fear that only becomes so soul and heart human destroying? I just don't understand it.
yeah, it's true. And there was an incident when I was younger. Uh, my sister was a little darker skinned than I was, but we had an Indian friend, which was even darker. So, of course, we had 5 in the bus. The non-whites had to sit in the back of the bus,
Mm-hmm.
just like 5 seats for them, whether the bus was full or not.
Right.
That 5 seats were occupied, you just have to wait for the next bus. So we got on the bus, and my sister and I and our Indian friend, and the conductor looked at us, and he said, "What are you doing with this coolie?" They called the Indian girl the
Yeah.
coolie. And me being very obstinate, I looked at him and he said, "Get off the bus if you were this coolie." And I said, "You know what? Maybe your sister was a coolie." So he pushed my sister out of the way and he slapped me
Wow.
in my face. And my sister fell over everybody else. And so I was livid. So I took my shoe off and I hit him on the head.
How old were you?
Um, I think about 15.
Uh-huh.
So, of course, there was blood everywhere and a fight broke out. And so we got off the bus and left before the police arrived.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
When we got home, my parents said, "What happened to you?" So we tried to convey the story. And I grew up in a very religious family.
Mm-hmm.
My father was a pastor. And so I told him the story, and he was just livid. And he said, "Wash up and come to the table, and we'll discuss this afterwards." And we said a prayer, but I was so livid. Even through the prayer, I was still on the bus fighting.
Yeah.
And he said, "I don't want you ever to do that. Don't want you to stoop to their level.
Right.
You've got to be humble." And I just made up my mind, I am not going to be humble.
Yeah.
I'm going to stand up and fight.
And it just takes the few to stand up and fight to create change. We're seeing
Yes,
it in Iran right now.
yes,
And literally they are executing people that stood up for change.
yes,
And it's only when the rest of the world says, we're going to stand up for these people that have no power against this regime. I know that um, while I was there, that the Olympics would ban South Africa because of the apartheid, so they couldn't play in the games, and there were various other things going on. And very often, because I have family back in England still, they would tell us of things that they're seeing that are happening in South Africa that we didn't know about. Because,
yes,
we didn't have TV, right, until 76 or 77. And of course, what you ever heard on the radio or the news or anything was so filtered. So
yes,
unless you actually saw it, you didn't know what was going on. And so everything was so controlled. And so it was
yes.
really hard for people to gather together, to stand up.
Yes. The apartheid, like the non-whites, we couldn't go and enjoy a seaside vacation because the beaches were strictly
Right.
for whites.
Yes.
And non-whites couldn't go on the beach. If you ever got near the beach, you would be beaten up.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I never went on a seaside vacation until I met my husband.
Hmm. What was it
And
like that first time going on a beach and going in the ocean?
oh, it was wonderful. We went to Loretta Marks,
Hmm.
and I could not believe what the whites were privileged to
Hmm.
compared to where we had to go and have a picnic, maybe
Right.
where we were invaded by red ants, on a
Yes.
farm.
Yes.
And
They'll
we
come
had
and
to
join you.
swim. Yeah, we had to swim in a dam. And yet there they had beautiful barbecue pits and lovely trees and
Hmm.
lakes, and it was just taking it in was just like, oh my God, what have I missed? And by this time I was 25 years old.
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
know
A quarter of a century missed on all of that. And of course, your family left behind. I mean, even longer for them to
yeah,
have that experience. So, yeah, it is. there's an awful lot of history that we need to look at. And, I'm completely against pulling down statues or doing that. And I think what it has to be is that we have to have those statues there and educate people as to what they did wrong. No, a lot of the forebearers, it's we can't blame them for everything, but at the same time, what we can do is learn. And if we brush things under the carpet or we don't pay attention to it, it gets repeated. And
Exactly.
this is why in North America you're seeing Nazism stepping up again, and you know, stars like Kanye West openly saying how he loves Hitler. And it's like, how can you when you know the atrocities that he did? And it is at the same time, it's like, why are we not teaching this history? And for many people listening to the show or even looking at the word apartheid won't even know what that means.
Exactly. And that's why I decided to write the book, because
Hmm.
even a lot of my young nieces and nephews, they don't know. They don't know
Yeah,
about it because they didn't grow up in it.
right.
And the other thing that I think is, if people just, um, the more you keep people down, the more they retaliate and it becomes ugly.
Yes,
So those that are educated, then they start looking down on you as just a bunch of trash.
right. Thugs. Yes,
Yes, but the thing is, they haven't been educated, so
right.
they're retaliating,
Yeah,
and it's just a vicious circle. If
it
people
is.
just realize,
It's bottled up, and at some point that top is going to flow, and it's like, how else can they articulate themselves? Right? Because they haven't had the education or it's been suppressed, even if they've had it privately. Um, where is that voice? And it does come together in the violence, unfortunately, which then, of course, they just say, see, they're just animals, right? So it plays into a vicious circle. I remember, what year was it? 70, might be 78, um, or 79, one of the other. I was living in Hillbrow, and we went up into actually Hillbrow Square at midnight, and everybody's there. Happy New Year. Everybody's joyful, and it's kind of makes, and all of a sudden the police come with the batons, and they didn't care who they hit. They just
yeah,
hit everybody. Yeah, and they were just so violent, and nobody could understand why.
yeah,
The people of color that were there were the people that are working there. They're certainly not living there, and they've just come out in the street like everyone else, right?
yeah,
And there they are, just beating people up for no reason. And there was an awful lot of violence going on when I was living in Hillbrow. That's why we called it Hellbrow. And Johannesburg, we called Jailbrow, because
yeah,
when I lived there, you kind of mid-70s, there was incredible amount of violence and um, a huge cosmopolitan, area. Fantastic for food, wonderful restaurants, etc. But we had the Yugoslavian mafia there, and they were brutal, absolutely brutal. No honor at all. If you're sitting at their table, they'll throw you out, throw you down the stairs, throw you through a window. They didn't care. And the police force, they just couldn't get enough police because, of course, the families would be threatened. And I remember working at a restaurant, and we had I can't remember, where they were from. I think one was from Durban to Bantu and somebody from somewhere else. And they were great, the people of color that were working there. And going home at night, one of them would walk with me, but he couldn't walk beside me. So he had to
yeah,
walk a few feet in front of me, a few feet behind. So we'd turn around. I would walk backwards. He would walk backwards, talking, and he would kind of escort me home to make sure that I was safe. One day he just went missing.
yes,
Where is he? We don't know. The police just came and took him. And we know
yeah,
that he had no rights. He was never heard from again. We know that there was no protection on him whatsoever. And we don't even know why they took him. And that was it.
yeah. I think they were probably watching him, and they were watching you, and so they might have thought there was something, maybe an affair going on between the two of you,
I hope
because
not. I had never thought about that. I know that there was something going on of accusing people of being spies. I don't know if it
Yes.
was for Rhodesia or even the Russian influence at that time. If you remember, Russia was trying to infiltrate a great deal in South Africa, and they were talking about spies and how, these colored people are spies. And
Yeah.
so, and I think that's what we were kind of led to believe at that time. I hope to God it was nothing to do with me. So I never thought about that. Now that will haunt me for the rest of my life because I hope not. But it is that they had no voice, they had no say, they had no rights. So, it's really hard we couldn't question. Why do you want to know? And then it was like, are you a spy? So, no
Yeah.
logic, no reasoning, no rhyme, just hysteria.
I know. I know. Well, when I met my husband, he lived in Hillbrow.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, we would meet for coffee in Hillbrow. And that's where, another thing, I saw the beautiful restaurants and
Hmm.
everything. And I think maybe because I was a little lighter skinned,
Yeah.
I got away with a lot,
Yes.
you know. And, but, the rest of the family were a little bit darker than I was. Uh, they did not experience what I experienced. Yeah.
Right.
I
Yeah.
remember going to the cinema in the Hillbrow,
Hmm.
uh, the huge cinema. What was it called? Anyway, it was beautiful. So I was so nervous when he invited me to go, and but I did not even pay attention to the sound of music. I was just so amazed that the beautiful, all around they had like castles on the walls and
Hmm.
lights compared to where I went, where I went to see a movie. We had to sit in little pokey little seats,
Hmm.
and there was a Jewish fellow that owned the cinema, and he would crack his whip to keep the younger kids in line. And he would say to them, move to the front, because you could see the movie first. I'm as I said, South Africa's in trouble right now. I mean, there's so much going on wrong there, but quite honestly, we can look at the world and say that there's so much going on right now. And in so many ways, for all our advancements, technologically, knowledge, etc., we still insist on going backwards. And, I think it's pretty futile because we've moved ahead too far to go back, but we still have those people that are resisting and wanting to go back to what they call the good old days, which is everybody in line and restrained um and that's just simply not going to happen. Well, South Africa now is ruled by blacks, but
Mhm.
I must confess, because a lot of them have not been educated,
Right.
no fault of their own.
Nope.
And it's like a reverse apartheid now, because
Mhm.
everybody wants revenge.
Yes.
I didn't have this, so I'm going to get this no matter
Mhm.
what, you
Yeah.
know. And it's such a vicious cycle, because if they'd only done it right in the first place, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Uh,
maybe, let's face it, anything like that is always extreme. I mean,
yes.
the entire thing, the pencil test, extreme. Taking people away from their own families, their own blood, their own parents, just because they're slightly different color or the hair was slightly different, is just extreme. But and again, I don't care if these people were so-called educated. They couldn't have been that educated to be that brutal.
Well, greed will take over, you
And
know.
fear,
Yeah,
right?
greed and fear, because they don't want what they have taken away from them.
Right.
Like you say, and it just continues. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, I remember I had a couple that I lived with in Hillbrow when I first went there, Gizzy and Bundy. Bundy was from Hungary. He was actually got out during the communist time in a car seat. He was actually in the car seat and driven out. And um, Gizzy was Flemish. And when that first started happening at the age of 6, they got her out of the country and she was raised by different people. And they had actually gone and lived in the Congo, only to
Oh,
have their home taken over, the pigs moved in, their lives threatened, and literally running for their lives yet again. And then in Hillbrow, when they first moved in there, which I think was, I was there in the 70s, they'd already been there like 20 years. I think it was all right when they first moved in there, but it was getting more and more violent and more and more brutal as time went on. And they were kind of late 70s and 80s at this point, so it was too late for them to move on any further. But it was, you know, I felt so sorry for them because every time they found, a place that they could call home, disruption would happen again.
yeah, yeah, it was terrible. It was terrible, yeah. And even when I met my husband, the police was haunting us, Um, and then on top of that, people in the neighborhood became police informants.
Yes, that's, I think, people are turning on their own.
Yeah,
Horrible.
so yeah, they'd be watching me, and as
Yeah.
soon as they came, the police would be there.
Hmm.
So with the result, he couldn't stop his car. He had to pick me up, and I jumped in, and we gone, and we were actually attacked by the police
Wow.
uh, with the bayonet.
Wow.
As soon as I shut the door, they came down with the bayonet on his car, and it
I'm
was
surprised they didn't deport him.
yeah, I'm surprised, but he
Mm.
did leave, and
Hmm.
then he came to Canada, and then of course I couldn't get a visa because now I was blacklisted, so that's why I had to
Just
go to.
because you dated a white guy?
Yes,
Mhm.
yes.
So how did you get out?
Well, I went to Germany.
But how
Yeah.
did you even get to Germany if you were
Well,
blacklisted?
well, Jürgen was in Canada, and I said that I was going to study in Germany,
Hmm.
and so I had someone help me, a lawyer,
Hmm.
or she had to pay.
Right, of course.
How I got, and that's that's how I got out. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Were
They
your
were,
family for you or against you doing this?
my mother was for me because she
Mm.
wanted me to go and experience what she never did,
Yeah.
you know, and have a better life. Yeah, yeah. It
So
was
how long
fun.
were you in Germany before you could come to Canada?
A month
Oh, that's
because
good. So you weren't
yeah,
apart for too long.
yeah. So and they worked fast to get me into Canada because he had worked on the visa for me. Yeah. So, but I had a son. I was married before,
Oh, really?
but my son couldn't get out.
Oh, no.
Yes.
So what happened to your son?
So he had to wait 2 years before his father gave permission. So
Mm,
I did not see my son for 2 years. Yeah.
wow. How old was he?
When he came to Canada,
Hmm.
he was 8 years old.
Still had a much better life, even though he had to wait to get here, right?
Right. That's right. And if my ex-husband didn't give me permission, I probably would never have had him with me. So
Hmm. Yeah, that's a hard one to leave behind. And that's a lot of people may not understand that, but it's like if you have any hope of giving him a better life, these are the things, these are the hard choices that you have to face, right?
yes, and I had many friends who you know who got exit visas and they could never get back
Right.
there. Even Maria Makeba, remember the singer, when she dated the Indian fellow Sunny Pillay,
Hmm.
and he was a ballad singer. And so when they left, all their songs were banned in South Africa, and they couldn't get back. She got back after Mandela came into power.
Right.
It was many, many years. And even the song, If You Were a Carpenter,
Yes.
you know,
Yep. If you were a
to marry me
carpenter, yeah.
anyway,
Mm.
would you have my baby? That song was banned.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because a lot of the colored boys were carpenters. So
Mm,
the song said, "If you were a carpenter, would you marry me anyway?"
right.
So that a lot of things were banned. Uh, some of the movies were banned. The non-whites couldn't see,
Hmm.
because it was interracial.
Right. Yeah, and God forbid they should give you anything to look forward to or anything to actually understand the repression or any fuel whatsoever,
Yeah,
right? Yeah. So
that's right.
apartheid actually was how many years then? 36, 37 years?
About 37, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, yeah, and a lot of, I had a friend who he looked white,
Hmm.
was fair with blue eyes, but his mother was Bantu.
Hmm.
He was brilliant, and he was studying to be a doctor. And because they wanted him to change they wanted him to change to be white, and he said, "No, I won't do that. I am who I am."
Right. What difference is it going to make the
Yeah.
label? I'm still the
So,
same, right?
yeah. So what they did was, when he was an intern, he couldn't use the same lunchroom with the whites.
Hmm.
So they gave where he had to have his lunch was next to the toilet
Oh
in
God.
a storeroom,
Uh-huh.
you know. And he finally left because he couldn't take it. So he went to Swaziland, where there was no apartheid, and he did further studies. And he eventually ended up in New Zealand,
Hmm.
where he became a pediatrician. And he was the first pediatrician to have a private practice in New Zealand.
You're
And
good
he
for him.
lived there until he passed away a couple of years ago. So
Mm.
there's so many stories to tell,
Yes.
uh, but I will leave it to the people to read my book.
Exactly, exactly. And the thing is that really, it sounds more about only if you escaped did you have a life. Otherwise,
Yeah,
you were a prisoner, of apartheid, of that restriction. When you look at it, 37 years is, an entire generation. Almost double generation because a lot of people have children early, and it takes a lot to undo that because they have no memory of what was before.
no,
And those young people have had children of their own, and this apartheid is all they've known. So of course, when the freedom comes, right, it's something they're not familiar with. There's no recall back to it, what was before. And so they have to kind of navigate their way through. And because it's suddenly freedom, right, it's the other extreme happens.
right. And because they were not educated,
Yeah,
many of the young girls um, married. They just married
yeah.
because that's all they could depend on was their husbands,
Hmm.
which resulted in a lot of abuse
Yes.
and in families. And I often wonder why these women stayed.
Hmm.
They kept having babies and babies, and yet they're getting beaten up, and but there was nothing else for these young women to do because they didn't have the education they needed.
No. Then, of course, AIDS came along, and then the whole philosophy around there. I remember, if a man who had AIDS had sex with a baby, he wouldn't have AIDS anymore. I mean, all these
And things like
ridiculous
that.
things. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, and the epidemic of that, and people dying, and children being left behind, and just absolutely horrific. And anytime, I mean, we look at it in North America. Fortunately, in Canada, the racism isn't as relevant as it is in America. And I interview an awful lot of Americans, who address that, and that it's in this day and age, 2023, that we're still talking about racism, and we're still talking about, the rights of and what people of color can or cannot do, or the brutality. I mean, the fact that lynching, I think it was in the 90s that they stopped, the lynching, what, the 90s? Are you kidding me? You
I
know,
know.
it's just we've still got a long way to go.
We do. We really do. And I don't know if that will ever happen because you keep getting these little cults that
Yeah.
are emerging.
Yes.
And the thing is being repeated over and over.
Yeah.
And I remember reading about the Black history actually in the States, uh, where they would, the people that worked in cotton fields, inject them with syphilis
Yeah.
so that, they can see if they can find a cure, and
Yeah.
these people were uneducated and they didn't know the difference,
Right. Yeah.
And that's why now today a lot of the blacks don't want to get the vaccination,
Yes. Yes.
because they're using us again.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
history just it seems to be repeated over and over and over again.
Yeah. I mean, like banning the books like, To Kill a Mockingbird and various other type of books. But
Yeah,
the thing is, we have this thing called internet today. And, everything that you need is right there at your fingertips. And so this ridiculousness of trying to ban this and ban that, I feel is more for the ignoramus that wants it banned than the people that they're trying to ban it from. Because we're in an era of, you're telling me I can't read, I can't do because of my color,
yes,
or my sexuality, or my faith, I am going to go and do it. So
exactly. Yeah,
I think
I'll
it's a
defy
different,
you.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So, but we still got to go through that transition. And, I believe very much that there is a conscious awakening going on at the present moment where people are going up into a higher conscious frequency. And that's one of love, self-love, love of each other, love more of, creativity of what we can do that doesn't kill us, but advances us. And
yeah,
for the people that are fearful of that because they feel they're going to lose control. The battle right now isn't so much on the color, is on the conscious rising. And
yeah.
they want to keep people dumbed down
That's
because
right.
if you keep people in fear, you keep them dumbed down, then you have control over them. But
Yeah,
we've seen through history that backfires every
exactly.
time.
Yeah, yeah. And with if someone in a higher position has the charisma, just how they can influence so many people, you know, and
Yes, I mean they don't even have to have charisma in the case of Mr. Orange. It's just that hate rhetoric. I give you permission to hate. I give you permission to disregard certain people, and then that's given them the right to believe that they can
yeah,
carry those actions out.
it's just the ego. It's
Yes.
just the ego. I don't know what, you know, humanity, honestly. Sometimes I just don't understand
Yeah.
people. Killing young people. Look at in Iran today.
Yes.
Two
Yes. And
young men that just starting to live their
yeah,
lives.
all because they protested the
Exactly.
regime. And apparently, numerous amount of children have been killed as well. And
Exactly.
it's just like I have no regard for life as long as we hold on, to our rule, which is unreasonable, unfathomable, and unproductive,
That's
right?
right.
And, as long as we hold on to our rule, us as men, as the rulers, um, they don't care who they kill in order to hold on to it. Well, that's desperation. And the more and more you show that desperation, the more and more humanity is going to stand up for those that you are disposing of, because we can't turn a blind eye. We can't turn a blind eye to our own. We can't turn a blind eye to what's going on in the world. We all have to stand up. We all have to speak out. We all have to act out.
Exactly. And so when after I met Jürgen, I met a lot of people in South Africa, multicultural groups, who was writing poetry.
Hmm.
And I fell in love with poetry
Hmm.
because I could express my inner feelings through poetry,
Hmm.
you know, and I still love writing poetry today. Yeah, so maybe I should read a poem that I wrote
Yes.
uh, in where is it? Where is it? Right, here it is. So during the apartheid years, when they were rioting and they were killing all these people in Soweto,
Hmm.
sometimes we would read about it, and sometimes I would try just to go and visit Soweto to see what it was like. So this is one of the poems I wrote when I was very frustrated. And it was called Kumara. As the African sun dipped on the horizon, you laughed with such glee as you listened to crickets chirp. While you knelt to pray, police officers kicked in the door of your thatched roof home. The soul candle flickered and dimmed. Flashlights glared in the darkness. Voices shouted and dogs barked. You whimpered as the search continued. You saw your father's shadow as he fled through the open window. In the distance, you listened to the pounding of his footsteps. Then gunshots rang out. Silence. 5:30, the cock crowed. Soweto awoke at the first rays of sunlight streamed through the winch door. As embers in the tin galleys started to fade, you stared into space, wondering if the crickets would continue to chirp at dusk. Would you ever hear your father's footsteps again?
Mhm. Unfortunately, far too much of a reality for so many, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's just, we've got to learn from history. You know, I've interviewed quite a number of people around the world, and one of them was a German guy who was on the wrong side of the curtain until he was, I think it was 11 or 12 when the wall came down in Germany. And he started a company called Pure Necessity, which was invest in people and planet for profit, not profit at the expense of people and planet. If we invest in our people and we enrich them educationally, lifestyle, wellness, just imagine the creativity and the productivity that would happen from that. And everybody would be enriched, everybody would be abundant. But we've
Yes.
got the small, narrow-minded little thinking, me, mine, my own, I don't want to share. And yeah, gulum, mine. So, and with that kind of thinking, unfortunately, those are the people that have hoarded the riches that then play the puppeteers over the governments and over corporations and over pharmaceutical, and they become the dictators. And instead of rationale, common sense, decency, rights to stepping forward. And we think as the public we're powerless. We're not. Each and every one of us has to find our voice, has to find our own consciousness, has to enrich ourselves so that we can be there as a force for the repressed, for a community, build those communities we want, and show the rest of them, the governments, if you want to be elected, this is what you are supporting, not the corruption.
Exactly. Corruption everywhere in South Africa now.
No, it's terrible.
It's terrible. I sometimes sit and think, what did we fight for?
Yeah,
We freedom, you know, and now it seems like things are worse than it was.
yeah. It's again that pendulum swing, isn't it?
Yes.
So far to the left and then it goes so far to the right. And eventually, after a few generations, it was settled down into the middle again, where,
Yes.
somebody stands up and says enough is enough.
Yeah.
But again, it comes down to us, why was everybody repressed? Because people went with apartheid. Why did not people on the white side stand up and say, this is wrong, this is cruel? And basically they handed it over to the thugs and said, okay, you can go and beat up, you can go tear people apart, you can go and kill people. It's okay as long as they're not white.
That's right. Well, I met a lot of, when I started to venture out, I did meet a lot of whites who sympathized, but unfortunately, they too were
Yeah.
oppressed, you
Yes.
know, and um, and so you just go with the flow. And as far as prejudice is concerned, you are not born with
No.
prejudice.
No.
You are taught.
Yes. Yes.
So,
And when you are taught, at some point you have to look at what you've learned and ask yourself, is this right? Just because I've been taught it, just because it's been the status quo, does that mean like a sheeple I have to carry on bowing? Or do I stand up and say, this is wrong, I want to see change?
yeah,
And then be
unfortunately.
the change we seek.
Yeah, but a lot of younger whites tried that, but their families were so against it, and so where
Mm,
did they go? They couldn't go and live with the black. They couldn't live with
right,
the. Didn't matter where they went.
right.
They were, be cat.
Ostracized. Hmm.
That's right.
And that's why, I mean, a huge exodus I know in the mid 70s, a massive exodus from South Africa of people leaving. Um, I left in 80. I left for a couple of reasons. One, I could not stand the whole apartheid thing anymore. It
Yeah.
just really got to me. But also, I couldn't stand the misogyny. And the misogyny was just, uh, the man thinking that, hey, you, chick, doll, throw things at you, get you to do things in work or in anything. It was still the white man's rule, however dense they were,
Yeah.
whether you were a woman or whether you were a person of color. And I just couldn't take that anymore. I was becoming so bitter and so
Yeah.
twisted, which is so against my very beingness that I had to leave. And
Yeah.
uh, and I came to Canada. I was actually going back to the States, but I met my ex-husband here 5.5 months in, and he's Oriental.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I went down a different thing of children being mixed. So so there's always somebody that's going to cast a stone, right?
Yes. Yes. And then again, it goes according to the way you look,
Yes.
your color. And I was surprised, even coming to Canada, I ran into some prejudice as well. I also ran into people who had immigrated from South Africa and came to Canada, and they were quite proud that they were involved in the apartheid thing. And,
Yeah.
and they were quite happy to tell me that they were, and that they were proud they did. So there you go.
Yeah. Yes. I think we have academic education,
Yeah.
but we also have heart and soul education. And I think if we could step into humaneness,
Yeah.
where we just look at another human being, not as an object or subject, but as a living being. And kind of, I don't want to hurt you. To do so would to hurt myself. I won't want to inflict anything on you because I wouldn't want it inflicted on me. And if we could look at each other as human beings instead of like a box of chocolates, a different chocolate.
Flavors.
I just don't get it. Because surely by this time, we've been here thousands of years, we could evolve beyond this bigotry, this whole thing of division. We just love to hate. Right? We love to hate, we love to damn, we love to persecute, we love to judge. This is the worst of human nature. And this is where we need to hold ourselves accountable and say, but is it serving humanity? Is it serving the planet? And if the answer is no, then we need to change our approach.
Exactly. But we are all at fault. I don't think there's one person who could tell me that in some way,
Hmm.
somehow, whenever, that they felt bigotry
Right.
towards that.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. I mean, I think until you become totally aware
That's right.
and aware of what you're saying or what you're doing or what your actions are, when you actually step up to owning it, then you realize. Up until then, we're kind of mindlessly following society's rule and we haven't questioned it. And when we start to question it and become aware, that's when we can own it.
That's right. But how long is it going to take for each and everyone? And I'm not singling anybody out, all of us.
Yes.
When are we going to learn?
We're
To
in
let
the
go?
process of learning. There are many people that are learning and they are adjusting and they are redirecting. It is happening. That's why we see so much protest from the people on the other side, because there are so many more people awakening and standing up for what is right, for humanity, for the planet. And you've got the other people realizing, oh my God, there's more of them than us. So therefore, we need to get violent. We need to shout louder. We need to be more vulgar. And that's the reason why they are protesting so much, because they know that the shift is happening. But it
Exactly.
needs to happen a lot faster, folks. So it's each and
Exactly.
every one of us. Yeah.
Each and every one. We are not just one person to blame.
No.
We are all guilty,
Yes.
honestly.
Once you know better, act better.
Exactly.
Right?
That's my
Yeah.
sentiment. Yeah.
Yeah. And we've all made mistakes. We've all, I was 14 when I went to South Africa. I didn't really know anything much about black people, white people, or apartheid. Why are they there? Why are we here? I was navigating as a teenager in a new country, in a new
Yes.
world, um, which was vastly
Friend.
different to the way I'd been brought up in England. So I went from being very, very coddled and protected, out into a totally different world. And that was kind of quite an adjustment for me on its own at that time. But yes, it's once we are aware, what are we going to do about it? And we don't want any more ostriches, head in the sand. We don't want to be, well, it's their fault, their fault, their fault. Three fingers are pointing back at you. What are you going to do about it? Now you know, what are you going to do about it? How can be a part of the equation? And it doesn't matter whether it's little or big. Every little action adds up.
Counts. Exactly. Yeah. And I think before you judge another person, stop and think.
Yeah,
How would you feel in their shoes?
exactly. Exactly. There's a wonderful thing that I post quite often. It was on Facebook and it was somebody begging, and it's a mirror and it's a person giving money, but what they see is themselves. And it's just simply called empathy. And it's
Yeah.
like, put yourself in their shoes, right?
Exactly.
Right. Would you want it done to you? If the answer is anywhere near no, then don't inflict it on another and don't stand by why it's been inflicted on another, right? Our voices can be heard. We we might be restricted to the how much action we can take, but we've all got a voice and we can all do something. And if every one of us came together, not with pitchforks, we've seen enough of that, but with harmony in together, that we're not going to tolerate that abuse anymore. We'll be the tide that changed, but it's got to be every one of us.
Exactly. And look in the mirror each morning you get
Yeah,
up and think, you know. But I yeah, I miss my family. I try to go back, every now and again, but with the way things are in South Africa
yeah,
now, uh, there's even fear of going back.
yes.
Now I've got all the freedom here, and
Hmm.
I don't have to worry about when my lights are going off and I
Hmm.
can't cook, or am I going to be killed if I stop at a traffic light?
Yes.
And so
And the
I
and the
just,
killing at the traffic light, folks, is depending what car you drive, is they'll kill you and take your car. And they don't care if they kill you. They want your car because they can make money out of, you know, taxi driving or selling parts or whatever the case is. It's just that life has just become too disposable.
exactly, yeah. There's no feeling for life anymore. It's just, I'm going to take revenge because I
Yeah,
didn't have this,
yeah,
and
yeah,
so now I'm going to get it. So
yeah,
what
yeah,
can you say, Sarah? Let's just hope and pray that things change.
yeah. Well, I'm always saying you can't control what happens to you, but you can control on how it happens for you. What are you going to do about it? Does it make you stronger? Does it make you more courageous? Does it give you more abilities? Does it put you in a different direction? When we can turn it around and go, it's happened for me to discover all of those things. And now, how am I going to use this to benefit my life and other lives instead of being the victim all the time? Because from the victim becomes the blame, then becomes the anger, then becomes the retaliation, and we all end up blinded, right?
And
So
it just goes round and round and
around
round.
and round and round and never stops. So we have to look at doing things another way. And that means, first and foremost, empower yourself so you can empower others, but not the pitchfork way, through education, through passion, through compassion, through empathy. All right, through standing up and giving someone a voice that doesn't have one. And let's look at it that we are all in this together. And the only way we're going to heal this is together. So,
Together. Exactly.
how do people get your book? Where do they get your book? How do they reach you?
Okay. I'm on Facebook. Um, I'll be launching my book soon, as soon as it comes out. It's in line to be published. It will be on Amazon. It will be available through Friesen Bookstore. I will put the address up on my Facebook page. And yes, and I believe we're going to be on YouTube.
Oh yes, this is on YouTube, it's on Odyssey, it's on 16 audio platforms, so you're going to be represented all across there. And all people have to do when they come back to selfdiscoverymedia.com is put in your name, Una, U-N-A, Bruhns, B-R-U-H-N-S, and they can also find you on Facebook that way with your name, Una Bruhns, Bruhns. And of course, you're on Friesen Press Store with your name in there. You've got your YouTube with your name there, and they can find all of that information on your show page as well. And they can share this. There's even a picture of the horrifying anti-apartheid groups, the Charlottesville Measure Massacre, which is just a reminder of just how awful, things got, and how we desperately need to make those changes, because we're going to repeat again. It may have a different name, it may have a different cover, but it's going to be the same story if we don't put a stop to it.
Yes, and I hope that people will learn from it, and that future generations will stand up for themselves, be educated. Don't go back and feel sorry for yourself.
Yeah.
Move forward, get educated, learn.
Yes. Yeah, and just please insert some compassion and empathy into your life. You don't want it happening to you, so why are you not standing up for those that it's happening to? And when you empower yourself, you're empowering somebody else through that compassion, through that knowledge, through those abilities to help other people, whether it's your voice, whether it's your social media, whether it's your action, whether it's your money. It's, every single one of us, one drop in the ocean adds up, makes the ocean. So let's be that one drop or many drops, but just do something.
Exactly. And do not let someone else define who you are. Stand up and be counted.
Exactly. I don't care what color you are, what religion you are, what economic situation you are, what sexuality you are. Current bottom line is, where's your heart? Where's your soul? Where's your character? Lift those all up and then be a contributor to your existence here on this planet. And what a positive one that serves not only you, but everyone else. Please don't be self-serving. We've had too many of those.
And educate yourself, please, out there, everybody, educate yourself.
You have no excuse. You have no excuse, whether it's education at school, whether it's internet, whether it's library, whether it's through movies, whether it's, it's at your fingertips. There is no excuse. So you've got to participate in your own education, participate in your own life. Life isn't a headliner. It is content. Please start devouring the content.
Not a handout.
No, it's a hand up. Not a handout. Exactly. Every single one of us has got to pay rent here on this earth, and we've got to decide how we're going to do that, how we're going to contribute to make things better, not worse.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you so much, love. It's a great story. As I said, I haven't done apartheid before. So many people don't even know what apartheid stands for. But, it's whether it's called that or not, we're seeing it mirrored in other countries, whether it's against women or whether it's against color or whether it's against religion. And what we've got to start seeing is a stop to it altogether. And so thank you so much for writing the book and sharing your story and coming and sharing with us today.
You're welcome, Sarah. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Until next time, folks, let us learn from the past so we do not repeat it, even if it's in a different color or a different cover book. We've got to stop letting the past repeat our present or our future, and it is up to each and every one of us. Until next time, bye for now. We hope that you enjoyed the show. Find all of our shows on selfdiscoverymedia.com under podcasts or self-discovery-media/shows. And for all our current shows, go to What's New. We are supported by you, the audience. You'll see a nice big shiny blue button for one-time donations, or follow us on Patreon and you will be able to support us there. We enjoy bringing you such wisdom, and the next show will be up in just a moment.